Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship at 1631 Ford Parkway in St. Paul, Minnesota. We meet every Sabbath from 11:30 a.m. to sunset. We'd love to have you join us. Most people stay for a few hours or an hour or whatever during the day and just enjoy Sabbath and rest and relax with us and enjoy Shalom. So please join us if you can, if you're in St. Paul on a Sabbath. We record something every week about news events so that you can see what's going on and how we're ripping stories from the newspaper and then we're comparing it with the Bible, and it's relevant. Whatever is written 2,500, 3,500 years ago is so relevant today. So this is from a few weeks ago when the portion for the Torah reading on God's schedule, the yearly schedule, was Bo, which is get out of Egypt. And the locusts were the first plague, the eighth plague, listed in Bo. And there were the locusts in Mecca and in Mexico during that time frame. And there are still locusts hanging around outside of Israel right now, so we need to pray against that. The main thing is there are other things occurring in the world too. I showed you how the poor magnetic North Pole is moving so quickly towards Russia, and I feel sorry for them because they're going to be very cold as the cold weather chases after them from behind as the North Pole drifts their direction. Then last week, I recorded this, which is about the red heifer and the two witnesses. And so the Torah cycle was the end of Exodus, which is that time frame when on Nisan 1, we're talking about the temple, the tabernacle rather, being dedicated, and also then the second day on Nisan 2, which would be a few days before Passover, you have to have the red heifer sacrificed so that you can have corpse contamination purification. So you can't serve the Lord and have corpse contamination or spirits on you. If you understand the spiritual connection, you can't have dead people's spirits on you, so you have to be purified, and that's what the red heifer does. And I argued last week that the two witnesses show up beforehand, before the Great Tribulation, and they sacrifice the red heifer because they're the someones listed in the text. That doesn't seem to make sense without putting them into that situation. Now, what's going on this week? We are recording for 3/17 of 2019, and this is Purimfest time. We're reading about Purim because that's next week. That's our big celebration. Now, it isn't one of God's big 7 festivals, but it's still a critical festival. The intriguing thing is that God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, but yet I'll show you the connection. Just stick with me on this video. I think you're going to love the connection to 1946 and 2019. So in 2019 right now, we see the Purim connection, which is Hamas and the people from Gaza and the people from Lebanon and Syria and Iran all want to rid the world of Jews. Well, that sounds like Nazis. So it's the same thing one more time. So let's look at the history of this. Once again, these are the festivals, but they're not Jewish festivals. It doesn't say that. In the Bible, it says they are God's Moedim, his festivals. And there are times in Revelation where you know this is God's festival that he's celebrating. It's the time of his wrath or the time of his festival too. So just keep that in mind. When you see these festivals listed out, they're important for you to know. 1, start keeping Sabbath. Just notice it, and notice that if you take time off on Sabbath, that you will be blessed. 2, keep his festivals. The first one coming up now is Purim. Just start to study it with this video here, and then when we come up to Passover, celebrate Passover someplace. Enjoy the festival of Passover. Yeshua was sacrificed during that time frame. He gave his body for the sin of the world, and then he was resurrected right at the end of Passover. So keep that in mind. He is the first fruits during that Passover time frame. Then, as we move forward in this video, we're comparing Edom, who is Esau, Jacob's brother, and there's a picture of Jacob handing the red, he's wearing red in this picture, handing it to Esau, who is hungry, he's famished, and he trades his birthright. He despises his birthright. So all of these men are connected. Edom, which is Esau, Haman, Hitler, and the final solution, and many today that are arguing that they want the Jews eliminated from the world. So this historical problem has never ended, and God does address it. So Esau, Edom, Amalek, Agag, Haman, Hitler, all of them share that same spirit of hating Jews. The Amalekites, descendants of Amalek, were the ancient biblical nation living near the land of Canaan, which is Israel. They were the first nation to attack the Jewish people after the Exodus from Egypt, and they were seen as the archetypical enemy of the Jews. The nation of Amalek is long gone, but they live on as an internal enemy that each battle on a daily basis. So there's still the Hitlers of the world. There's still these Nazis. They're skinheads. They're everywhere. And Eliphaz, son of Esau, the patriarch of Jacob's brother and sworn enemy, and his concubine Timnah, had a child named Amalek. Amalek grew up in Esau's household, imbibing Esau's pathological hatred of Jacob's descendants. Along the way, his offspring became the nation of Amalek, and they lived south of the land of Israel, which is now the Negev desert. This is from Chabad, so this is an article that they gave me to be able to explain it to you, but this goes on and on and on. The mitzvah to destroy Amalek from Deuteronomy 25:19 implies that no trace of Amalek's existence, that is genocide technically, could be left. The point of genocide is that they're idolatrous. If all they're going to do is try to kill you, you have to kill them. And we'll get to that story as we get into the Esther story in just a minute here. Nothing, explains the sages, could serve as a reminder of Amalek's name, not even an animal about which, and that God even goes down to the animal level of this. This animal belonged to Amalek? No, that has to be destroyed too. The first Jewish king, Saul, was commanded by the prophet Samuel to wipe out Amalek. Saul was victorious against the Amalekites, but he spared the choicest of their flocks and the Amalekite king Agag. When Samuel found out about Saul's disobedience, Saul lost his right to kingship. Yes, he did. And Samuel then killed Agag himself. That's a prophet killing this king. But before he was killed, Agag sired a child who would keep Amalek's lineage alive. Some 500 years later, one of this child's descendants was Haman, the Agagite of Purim fame. This is again from Chabad. Hitler seems to be of that same spirit. I can't claim that he is a son of Esau, Edom, Agag, anything like that, but was he possessed? I think I can make a case for that today. So, these anti-messiahs are in the world and they are part of us. So this is the intriguing thing. Keep this in mind. This is from 1 John, and the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does God's will remains forever. Children, this is the last hour, and it is especially 2,000 years later now. You have heard that the anti-messiah is coming, and in fact, many anti-messiahs have arisen now, which is how we know that this is the last hour. Yes, I know, 2,000 years. They went out from us. That means they were a part of us. But then they really weren't part of us, for if they had been part of us, they would have remained with us. So keep that in mind. He's saying they were in with us, and they went out from us. So the ones that will attack you the most are your friends, family, and the people that closest to you. You keep your enemies close, and well, you know the phrases. So anyway, if they would have remained with us if they were really actually part of us. But you have received Messiah's anointing from the Hakadosh, the God Spirit, and you know all this. So this goes on and on and on, but we're going to give you the Purimfest story today. This is the intercession of Esther with her king and against Haman in a picture from Petro Paulina. This is another rendering of this. This is the 10 sons that were killed and hung. Now, God authorized this. Why would God want them to be hung? We're going to show you in connection with the 1946 Nazis. So obviously, I argue that's a Jubilee year when Purimfest occurred the first time in 483, 482 BCE. But 1946, not a Jubilee year, but a very important year as we see prophecy fulfilled again. Haman's 10 sons died and were hanged. Yes, the same day after the king had been told of the number of those killed in Shushan, the capital, he said to Esther, the queen, if the Jews have slaughtered 500 men in Shushan, the capital, and the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Now, whatever your request, you will be granted it. Whatever you want, it will be done. Esther replied, if it pleases the king, let the Jews in Shushan act again tomorrow in accordance with today's decree. Also have Haman's 10 sons hanged on the gallows. The king ordered these things done. A decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's sons. They were dead already, but he hanged them. So the Jews in Shushan assembled also on the 14th day of the month of Adar, that's coming up in just a few days here, and killed 300 men in Shushan, but they did not touch the spoil. Interesting. 10 sons of Haman and the 10 sons of Hitler. So we're making this connection here. They put to death the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamata, the enemy of the Jews, and there's the names, and I don't need to pronounce them for you, but Parshandata, Dalphon, Aspata, Porata, Adalia, Aridata, Parmashata, Parmashata. That is the seventh one. Keep that one in mind. That is strong fist. Just keep that in one in mind. Arisai, Aridai, and Vaisata. And then the Germans that were killed in 1946, they were also hung. And there were supposed to be 11, but there were only 10 that were hung. One killed himself beforehand. Hans Frank, William Frick, Alfred Jodl, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Wilhelm Kettel, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Alfred Rosenberg, Fritz Schackel, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, and Julius Streicher, the seventh one hung. We'll be talking about him today and making these comparisons between Parmashata and Julius Streicher. So let's realize that names have meaning. Okay, so the names of these sons are distances or door or bad intentions, gathering backwards, lifted up. Here's praying like a lion. Here's Julius Streicher, the seventh one, which is Parmashata. And that's Streicher, strong fist or rips apart. And we'll compare this to what he did for Hitler. And then evil that subjugates and bitterness of the olive. These are the 10 sons of Haman. And here is from the Torah reading. Now, technically, it isn't part of the Torah. Okay, that's the first 5 books. But in my Chumash book that I have, the Megillah of Esther and the other Megillahs are listed there. They're the little tiny books. And keep in mind, when you're in Revelation 10, that's a Megillah that they're talking about there. It's a little tiny book. So look very carefully along the side here, and I'll show you another slide. There are little letters in here too. And so, you know what, I'll just move on to the next slide. But this is actually in the text, so keep that in mind. And here it is with the little letters. Do you see the little tav up at the top here? The little shin at the seventh one there. And then the last one is a little zayin. But look at the big vav there. Do you see that huge vav? So let's look at what they mean. The vav is the 6th millennium. The tav is 400. The shin is 300. The zayin is 7. That would mean the year would be 5707 in Hebrew years. So let's take a peek at that. Julius Streicher, he was the propagandist. He was the 7th one hung. He's the strong fist. And here's his quote. What a wonderful man. What a horrible beast of a man. The Jew is a devil in human form. It is fitting that he be exterminated, root and branch. That sounds like Haman, doesn't it? That was the exact same story going on during the Esther story. Here's what Hitler had to say about him. And so the main fighter for the DSP, you know, the Socialist Party, the German Socialist Party, as I have said, was Julius Streicher. Then the teacher in Nuremberg, at first too, had a holy conviction of the mission and the future of his movement. These are wicked, wicked men. They are possessed men. According to CBS News radio archives, during the time when these men were hung, Streicher walked steadily 6 feet to the first wooden step, but his face was twitching. As the guard stopped him at the bottom of the steps for identification formality, he uttered his piercing scream, Heil Hitler. The shriek sent a shiver down my back, the CBS correspondent's back. We all expected that sometime during the procedure, the shout, Heil Hitler, would ring out. Wild-eyed Jew hater Julius Streicher bellowed out that greeting and followed it as he climbed the 13 stairs with the words, "Now I go to God." Purimfest 1946 goes now to God. Now I've got another quote on this too, so we'll compare and contrast the 2 different news stories. As its echo died away, an American colonel standing by the steps said sharply, "Ask the man his name." In response to the interpreter's query, Streicher shouted, "You know my name well." The interpreter repeated his request, and the condemned man yelled, "Julius Streicher." Purimfest 1946. So we'll continue on with the storyline from CBS News. As he reached the platform, Streicher cried out, "Now it goes to God." As he was pushed the last 2 steps, and he was pushed the whole way, okay, to the mortal spot beneath the hangman's rope. The rope was being held back against a wooden rail by the hangman. Streicher was swung suddenly to the face the witnesses and glared at them. Suddenly he screamed, "Purimfest 1946. Purim is a Jewish holiday celebrated in the spring commemorating the execution of Haman, the ancient persecutor of the Jews described in the Old Testament. This is once again CBS News. Here's another report of this. And so it's Nuremberg infamy on trial from Joseph Persil. Okay, so this is a different report. The commotion broke out at the entrance of the gym. 2 GIs propelled a very resistant Julius Streicher through the gym door, Back in his cell, the guards had to force Stryker into his clothes. At the foot of the gallows, he refused to give the American colonel his name, screeching instead, Heil Hitler. For the love of God, Julius, Father O'Connor pleaded, tell them your name and get it over with. Stryker shouted, Purimfest 1946, and then turning to Sergeant Woods, the executioner, said, someday the Bolsheviks will hang you. After Stryker disappeared through the trapdoor, an eerie moan persisted. He couldn't die. He wasn't going to die. He was demonically possessed. So then Woods had to descend and stab him repeatedly to kill him, because even hanging couldn't kill this man because he was so demonic. And then the moaning stopped. So during this time frame, this is one of the Nazis that was killed. This is the 10 days of awe when this judgment came down to hang them. And it was delayed slightly, so it worked out perfectly into 1946, but into the Jewish year of 5707. So it's that interesting time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the judgment time frame during those 10 days. So let's look at it on a calendar. The trials ended 10/1/1946. But then this is 5707, so that's Tishri, that's the days of awe. But then they actually hung them on the 16th of October, which is very interesting. That's Bereshit, the first one in Genesis, and that is Hoshana Rabbah, which is a major rejoicing day when they were hung, October 16th, 1946, which is 21 Tishri of 5707. And this is off a website that I go to all the time to be able to compare and contrast the God's holidays and God's days versus the Christian days. So the reason why we only had 10 killed, just like Haman. So every Haman is hoisted on his own petard, but there should have been 11. And that is because one of them committed suicide beforehand, and that was our fat general over there. And he ate some cyanide beforehand, and so he died before and making it just 11. And the interesting thing is that that general wore women's clothing, and Haman's daughter, according to the stories, killed herself so that it was only the 10 sons that were hung. So very interesting that that occurred. So now we'll compare it going forward to what's going on coming into your lives as the beast comes in. So let's look at the 10 final kingdoms. And I saw a beast, this is Revelation 13, and I saw a beast come up out of the sea, 10 horns. Karen means power, power centers, and 7 heads. That means that the Antichrist will rule from 3 of them. Probably Germany will be his foremost location. So there will be 7 leaders, but 10 power centers. On its horns, this main one in Germany, 10 royal crowns, and on its heads blasphemous names. The beast which I saw was like a leopard, which is like Germany, with feet like a bear, that's like Russia, and a mouth like a mouth of a lion, that's Great Britain. To the dragon, that's compared to Satan in China, gave its power, its throne, and its great delegated authority. One of the heads of the beast appeared to have, and that's plural. So when you see that it's the Antichrist being killed, no, it's one of his locations, receives a fatal wound, but his fatal wound is healed, and the whole earth followed after the beast in amazement. So keep that in mind. There are these 10 locations. One of them, one of those heads receives, well, actually 7 heads. One of those receives a fatal wound, and that angers him, but it does not mean that he is actually killed by somebody. Okay, that's Revelation 13. So the Satan knows this time is short right now. He knows that he's on a tight leash and a short leash. He's very angry right now. Our God is one of shalom, and Satan loves death and riots and mob violence, and he wants to kill the Jews like Haman and like Hitler. These are the 40 days that we just started. Most people call it Lent, but really we're waiting to get up to Nisan 10, the day that Yeshua is inspected in the temple back during the original Passover time frame of 30 AD, I call it, 30 Common Era. So this is a time of repentance. If there was a first Exodus, keep in mind in the Bible there is a second, much greater Exodus. Satan knows what's going on with these days. He realizes the false prophet is ready to go in Rome. He knows the beast you call the Antichrist is laying in wait. All the pieces are ready to be assembled. What would you do if you were thoroughly evil and only had a few years left to spread your fame? If the Satan is preparing to feast on you, what are you doing? Are you praying? Are you repenting? Are you preparing yourself for what's going to occur? So which days are you keeping? Once again, as I've always stated, the seals are linear, and they're the birth pangs leading in to these final times. The first seal already kicked off in 1967 as Moshe Dayan handed back the Temple Mount area. And as a result, we have just seen societies collapse worldwide, and they are collapsing quickly now. The second seal is east of Jerusalem is the warmongers. We call them the neocons. Bush, Cheney, all those men started wars that just don't seem to end. We don't know how to end those wars. The third seal, so that was 2001, 2003. 2012 was the kickoff of the third seal, and you'll notice food prices rise, and that was prophesied, and so you'll have to check my other videos to be able to figure out exactly how that works out. Then the fourth seal is yet to come. That's 1.8 billion deaths that will be horrific. The fifth seal is martyrdom. We've seen signs of that. We'll see more as we go forward, and that is exactly what it says. It's phazo in the Greek. It's shekin in the Hebrew, and that's very typical with a ritual, bound and slip sacrifice. Earthquakes, volcanoes are the sixth seal, and polar and continental drift, plus asteroids and things like that. So we're waiting for that at some point in time after the fourth seal hits. Once again, we see all of these horrific things occurring to Israel right now as Haman and Hitler and all these spirits of Esau, Edom, are attacking the Jews to try to create foment of war. We see it from Iran, we see it from Syria, we see it from Lebanon, we see it from Gaza, and other places too. So here's the missiles being sent at Tel Aviv recently here in March. This is March 15th, the report from this. So Haman's spirit is still alive and thriving in 2019, and it's not going away. According to this man, who is a wonderful prophet from India, this is Sadhu Sundar Sevaraj, the time of the two witnesses is soon. It's months, not years, to release the anointing. And that is the end of this video. I hope that you saw all of those connections and get some blessing from realizing what's going on in your world today. Thank you. Bye-bye.